Hey y'all, this is Jeremy Lynn Woodall. I'm sitting here with my good friend, local musician, well, Texas musician, Barry Horne, and we're going to talk about his new song today. What's it called? Calling in Your Heart?
Calling in Your Heart.
Nice,
Yeah,
very
my
cool.
friend Jim Bush wrote it.
Let's talk about who you are, where you come from, and how'd you get started playing music?
Oh, hell, it goes back a long ways, that's for sure. Yeah, Jim was a big influence early on to me, but when I was raised in Ennis, I had an older brother that listened to Kingston Trio, so I listened to banjo music and folk music, and then the great music of the 60s. Then I met Jim, and he introduced me to this guy named Billy Joe Shaver, man. And he was a local musician around here, which turned into listening to Waylon Jennings and Jerry Jeff Walker and all of the Texas country music. And I just kind of fell in love with that, and that's been my main love ever since.
Anyway, how'd you get started into actually picking and playing, though?
Oh, hell. Well, the first thing I had to do was buy a banjo. I wanted to be part of the Kingston Trio.
Right on. Hey, them greenback dollars.
And I was terrible at it. But I do have a picture of me and Jim playing. And David Zychek, he saw that picture when I first met him, and he called me Banjo Barry for all these years.
Banjo
And
Barry.
just kind of stuck with it now. But I gave that up after a few years, realizing I wasn't all that great at it, and got a guitar. And I just kind of piddled around and played with some different bands and stuff. And then at one time, I did the restaurant thing with the rhythm box and the 12-string guitar, doing all the cover tunes.
Did you play in like rock bands? Did you guys play bars?
Well,
and
you
stuff,
know,
or?
I guess the first real band was there was a guy came up from Brownsville, Texas. He moved into Dallas. His name was Henry Lee, and we were looking for somebody as a lead player there in Ennis, and he answered an ad. Oh, I know. We went up to Arnold and Morgan Music up in Garland back then, I think it was, and he came down and he played with us a while. Then he talked me into going full time with him. I realized later on the reason he wanted me in the band is because I had a PA and a van.
That's usually what
That's a big factor.
the biggest factor when you hiring a new
So
guy.
that didn't last very long. I think a December in Cedar Falls, Iowa, as a band let me know that I didn't living on the road was not my thing.
It's not for everybody. It's not. That's for sure.
Well, you certainly have done it
That's
all
for
your
sure.
life.
I've been lucky. It's got to be in your blood, you know. But there's nothing wrong with sitting at your house playing and doing your music and stuff. But you still sit around and write songs, though, don't you?
Well, you know, I'm not the great songwriter. My good friend Jim Bush, he is the big songwriter. And when there was lots of twists and turns in my life, but I taught and coached. Well, I came to Dawson here in the late '70s, and I'd kind of given up on the music thing, and I decided I was the basketball coach here. And the first thing the cool guys in town did was they said, you got to meet this guy from Dawson here named Sam Davis. And he played in a band with David Zychek, the Groove Kings.
Cool.
And so I started following them, and then David and I just became really good friends over the years. And I tried for a while, like I say, it was during that, after I quit coaching, that I played the clubs and restaurants and stuff. Then I was carpentering part-time. You can relate to that, can't you?
Of course.
Yeah.
If you-
But you know what? I found out my carpentering paid a lot better than the music
Oh,
did.
absolutely, absolutely.
And then it was the late 90s, around 97 or 98, when David had quit playing with Night Ranger. And his girlfriend, Shanlon, they had a young baby, and David was just tired of the road. And so he started a studio. That's where he met Ronnie Griffin. And David called me up. He knew I was over there in Waco building houses. And he said, I need some help. And so I got my cabinet guy in there, and we built a control room, and we put the glass in, and fixed the studio up and everything. And he said, well, you're a musician. Let's record something. And I said, well, hell, let's do it,
Right on, right on.
Well, it didn't go great at first. He sent me to a voice teacher, which helped me out a lot. You and I have talked about that. Billy Joe was a bad influence on me there. He had some really bad little hiccups, I think we called them, wasn't it? Well,
Those hiccups are what sold the records.
that was him,
man.
though. That was his
That's-
style.
I guarantee you.
That's what was great about it. Uh-huh.
Yeah, a lot of people try to polish things up too much, and they don't let the real come through. And Billy was definitely good at letting what was real shine through in the way he wrote. Tell me about Jim. How'd you guys get to know each other,
Well,
and how'd you guys come to write this song?
well, I met Jim. Jim was, I think he was working for the newspaper over in Corsicana, and I was going to college over there. I had a friend that I just met, Gary Edmondson, and he introduced me to Jim. And Jim and I just hit it off, I mean, from the get-go. I don't know what it was, and we've been best friends forever. And I always tried to promote him because he was such a great songwriter. It's a cool thing is how his career and Billy Joe's are kind of like a shadow one of the others. Billy Joe was born in M House, not Hen House, which the people in Corsicana still claim him.
I still call it Hen
Yeah.
House, Texas.
Well, I asked him why he told people that he was from Corsicana, and he said he got tired of people thinking he said Hen House. And then you said that you thought he was saying Hen House.
I did till we went through there that time. I was
Right.
telling you about that.
Well, M House is a little small town, I don't know, community, a wide spot in the road about 6 miles from Corsicana. But Jim was born on the other side in a little place called Tupelo. Jim knew about Billy Joe before he was ever big time.
Really?
And then, of course, when Waylon did the Honky Tonk Heroes album. But Jim he was prolific as a songwriter. And we tried promoting him a little bit. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. We cut a 45 at one time. And, I've just kind of pushed him all along. But when David gave us this opportunity, I said, well, I'm not a songwriter per se, but my friend Jim is, and I cover a lot of his music. So we started taking some songs in. I'd play them for David. And, David was a big rocker, but it didn't matter what you brought him in there. I remember one song I brought in there, it was so hokey, campfire cowboy. and David listened to it, and he tuned his guitar and ran it through some sort of instrumentation where it sounded like a dobro.
Nice.
And he's singing
Nice.
ooze in the background. And I said, well, I can work with this guy for sure. So we did that for a pretty good while. I'm curious as to how you and Eddie's story together. How did that come about? How did you know Eddie?
Well, I got to know Eddie first when I went to go join what was known as the world's hardest rocking band, or hardest rocking country band, was a band called Diamondback Texas here in Texas. And at first I got hired to run sound. I'd come out of a rock and roll band, and I was hired to run sound for these guys. After a while, I kind of wanted to be back on stage, and I was like, well, let me play guitar for y'all. I'd never played guitar in a band in my life. I was the bass player and the singer in this rock band. But I didn't tell them that. I told them I was a guitar player. And I don't think I was fooling anybody, because they said, well, here, if you can learn how to play like this, then we'll give you a job. And they gave me a copy of Tramp on Your Street. It's a great album. It's got some killer guitar playing on it. So I took about the next 3 or 4 months and continued to work sound for them, and carrying their clothes in and out of places and opening closing doors and crap like that. And finally, I got where I could, it wasn't easy. I got where I could do some of those Eddie licks, enough for them to hire me. And over time, I got to know Eddie. Eddie popped in the bar quite a few times and would sit up and play with us, and I kind of got to know him through that. It was really pretty surreal for me at the time, but looking back on it,
How old were you then?
I was probably 25, 26.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay.
And it's a half my life ago. But me and Eddie became good friends, and eventually he brought his dad in, and one thing led to another. And when Eddie passed, a few years after Eddie passed, Billy had been playing with a lot of older guys, and they kept dropping dead on the road. And he got tired of that, so he said, I'm gonna hire a young guy. And he remembered that Eddie had mentioned that I was real close to his style.
Right.
So he came out and sought me out, and he ended up hiring the whole band. And we got to go out as a band with him for a good year, maybe a year and a half. And then, Billy started doing his thing. He's kind of a tumbleweed. I just tried to stick in there as long as I could, man.
Well, I heard earlier, that you said he fired you like 10 times.
He
You probably
did.
lost count.
Maybe probably more than 10 times. 10's a good round number.
Yeah.
But
Well, he was a tough old codger, but my God, there was something about his music. He lived it, didn't he?
he did. If he was going through something, he would write about it. That's why those songs are so good, because he would tell me that he said it a lot that writing songs is the best form of therapy. And we all need a therapist. So
Don't we still?
if you look at those songs, you can tell how he was trying to work some of those things out in his life, and some of it was him figuring those things out. So, he just had the ability and the childlike mind to put it into a few words as possible and put it onto paper. And we're so lucky that he did. Like a lot of these other artists that are excellent at what they do. Like Eddie Van Halen, we're so glad he committed some of that to tape. What if he just never gotten known by anybody and just gone in a garage and gone through life and been like a social worker or something? It would be a completely different world out there. And I look at Billy as an icon, kind of the same way. Tell me a little bit more about Billy Joe.
When I turned 50 years old, my wife Doris asked me what I wanted to do for my birthday. And I said, well, I knew Billy Joe wasn't. He was Brenda, I think, was real sick, like in the late '90s. This is '99, and so I knew where he lived, and I just went over and knocked on the door and went in the kitchen you've been in many a times,
Wow.
and the old house.
And he just opened the door.
Well, oh yeah. I noticed a couple of pit bulls around. I wasn't really sure,
That's
but
not like
he
him to
was
open
real
the door.
receptive, and we sat and talked for a while. And I said, I've always just kind of been a fan of yours, and I've seen you and Eddie play a couple of times, and I got this place out here. I'm turning 50. Would y'all come out and play? And he was real skeptical about it, And I said, well, just think about it. And it was a couple of weeks off, and I left my card with him. And so I left, and I was kind of disappointed. And then a couple of days later, I was over in East Texas with my friend Jim Bush again, and we were camping out. And I had one of those bag phones back then, before cell phones, and my bag phone goes off, and
Wow.
it's Billy Joe. He said, I've reconsidered. I'll come play your birthday party for you. Oh, and it was great. So him and Eddie came out here.
Wow.
Of course, when I told Jim I had Billy Joe on the phone, he didn't believe me. He thought I was pranking him, But so he came out here, and Billy Joe was real skeptical at first, but it didn't take long to where he just fit right in. And just became friends with everybody. And he did a couple of sets, and my guys played with him a good bit. And then he was ready to leave come 1 o'clock or so, and Eddie wasn't ready to leave, so Eddie stayed around. And my friend Jack McVeigh was playing drums, and Jack said, well, I'll take you home. Hell, they were still around here at 8 o'clock in the morning the next morning.
That's great.
And him and Jack became really good friends. But tragically, it was that same year that he OD'd down on New Year's Eve.
That's what I was about to say. You were lucky to get to see one of Eddie's last shows,
I know.
And that's really cool because he was somewhere around people that appreciated him, and he knew that,
Well, you and I have talked a little bit about this. It's kind of like you and people like Eddie, people kind of go through y'all to try to get to Billy Joe.
They did a lot of that.
Yes,
for sure.
And it's part of it, these idol worshipers, I guess.
It's just part of it.
Getting access to it. Yeah, that is part of it. But, Billy Joe went through a couple of really rough years there. But once I got to meet him out here, and he became, real familiar, and I would see him at shows and stuff, and he always remembered my wife, Doris. He would never forget her. So you were talking about the one place y'all played up in Fort Worth was White Elephant.
Mm-hmm.
So him and Eddie were playing up there one night, and it was break, and I kept looking around. I couldn't find Doris anywhere. Shit, she was out on the balcony with Billy Joe smoking a cigar. So every time he saw Doris, he remembered that he smoked a cigar with this woman.
Right.
And we did some gigs together after that, and then, of course, you started playing with him, and then our friend Randy brought you out here about 15 years ago.
I think
or
that's
something
how we
like
met.
that.
I wasn't around Billy too much when he was coming out here and playing. Randy had told me that he came out here, and I was like, well, I got to go out there and play too.
Right, yes.
So,
yeah.
And the fact that Eddie had played out here makes it all even the more special. They just played right over there in that corner, didn't they?
They did, yes.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
And then, unfortunately, 6 years ago, I lost my wife, Doris, to cancer. And it was rough the first year. But I had this big house, and so her and I used to like to travel a lot, and we would go to Airbnb. So I thought, well, I'll just open up a couple of rooms to Airbnb. and just try it out.
Right.
And it worked out really good, and so I've expanded. I found other platforms to list it on. And then my friend Jim, the past year, he said, you know, I've got a song that I wrote years back that reminds me of your place. And he told me about it, and I, okay. And then I saw him again, and he reminded me of it again.
Well, people come here and camp, don't they?
Yes, I have like 2 rooms that I rent out. I have camping trailers. I have tent spaces and things like that. And we do music out here a pretty good bit.
I remember playing out here when they did the eclipse.
Oh, that's right. We did have that big
They had the
thing,
big
huh?
eclipse here in Texas. What was that, a year or two ago?
Yeah, it was last April.
It was last
Well, that's why
April?
I've got this map back here behind me of all these people from all over the world. I had a guy from New Zealand here, and I had some folks from Europe, and
That was a really cool day. That was a really cool day. You know, a lot of Texans weren't really appreciative of everybody coming here, because I guess this is where you could see, this little part of Texas that we're in was where you could see the eclipse the best. Or
yeah,
it
we
was
had
a
it had
full
like 4
eclipse.
minutes of totality.
So there, everybody was kind of converging on Central Texas, and a lot of Central Texans were talking smack about it. But I noticed, you know, that here's Barry. He's putting on a concert and welcoming everybody in. So I thought, well, you know, that's pretty cool. Then you asked me to play, and I thought, man, of course I'll come
Of
play.
course.
If there's any kind of madness in Texas, and you know, a place to sit up and play
Well,
guitar.
that is a great thing, and you know, you were talking earlier to me off camera here that you know, the one good thing about Texas is part of the music. The music is always going to be there,
Yeah.
and it's gone through different phases and stuff. But I started going to these Larry Joe Taylor festivals back in the late '90s, and that's what I was telling my friend David. I said, you know what? This same stuff that I was doing 20 years ago, there's a bunch of 20-year-olds doing this now.
Right.
And it's just like it's just resurfaced. And Larry Joe's went crazy. It went from like 2,000 people to like 50,000 the last time I was out there. It's bizarre. But this is people loving music. Of course, they like to party and drink their beer too.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's part of being a Texan too.
But back to my friend Jim, he said this song that he'd written, and that's a great thing about songwriting too, is those guys that are really prolific, they have all these songs and they'll play them and they'll shelve them, and then some of them make it. This one he wrote, you know, maybe 15 years ago.
Right.
And he kept telling me, he said, this reminds me of your place. And so after about the 3rd time he told me that, I said, okay, play it for me. And so and after he did, I said, you're right, that's good. So I said, we got to record this, and that's where I thought about
That's
you.
where we put it together.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
And this guy behind the camera over here, Clinton, he doesn't want to show his face. He just happened to show up out here,
Yeah.
and he's a videographer. And so it's kind of like a little synchronicity of things that happen. And by the way, Jim is really pleased with the recording you did on
Well,
that.
I'm glad. It's all about the ingredients. Most of the time, my thing is just to stay out of the way and let the music happen. In this case, the music was great. So
It was one of those serendipitous things that kind of happened. We recorded out here 7 or 8 takes, something like that, and then you took it back to the studio and added some vocals and
just a little bit, just
Yeah.
you know, just try like I said, just trying to stay out of the way. But
it turned out.
I'm glad Jim likes it, and I hope he's doing well. It's always good to see him. I wish he could have been a bigger part of it.
Well, the problem with him is here in the last few years, he's had a real problem with his voice, and he doesn't get to perform much. So it's really frustrating for him. But it hasn't stopped his creativity, that's for sure.
That creativity just keeps going. That's for sure.
Just last night, I had a group from Dallas down here, and we sat around and played music all weekend long.
That's great.
So that's the
man.
kind of thing that we do.
It's a great room.
And you seem to like the acoustics to it as well.
Man, this I don't know if the camera can show it. Maybe they can show a photo of it. But there's wood everywhere. It's like a inside of a log cabin, and it's got a cement floor, so it's kind of like the best of everything. And there's enough. It's just a great recording room. The corrugated plastic walls. I don't know how that worked, but it does.
Yeah. You know, performing on a stage in front of folks is fun, but you know, it's all really more intimate when you've got 3 or 4 people just real attentive listening to you.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you're in a club, there's people talking and doing all this sort of stuff.
Well, you know, those house concerts and stuff. They're becoming bigger and bigger now
exactly.
because it's just easier to for those artists, like especially the ones that are not top level artists, to book something like that, and it can be lucrative sometimes, you know. So yeah, we're seeing a whole lot more and more of that.
Dana Cooper came through here a couple of years ago. I didn't know who the hell he was. He didn't know who I was. We just happened to stop.
That's what
And
makes
then
it
we
work.
got to talking about his music, and we did a concert together out here. And man, you know, people like him, I admire those guys. He's up my age, and he's still traveling. Oh, he probably does 200 gigs a year, working his ass off. You know, that's what you got to do. He told me, you know, what else would I be doing?
Right.
That's going to be you here.
That's about
in your
right.
later years, isn't it?
200 dates a year.
Oh, easily.
That's a
I
lot of
bet he
dates,
does.
man.
Uh-huh.
Ain't but 365 days in a year. I don't think we ever ran 200 days. We run about 175 probably at the most.
Yeah.
We run 3 nights a week or something like that.
Well, you've done some really interesting gigs.
I've been real lucky, man. I've been able to play a lot of places that I always dreamed about, you know. And if I ever had a dream as a kid, at some point playing with Billy Joe, I woke up and it was coming true,
Right.
you know. So and that happened several times. I was very, very fortunate, you know.
Ed Sullivan stage.
At Sullivan Stage, that's right. We
Right.
did David Letterman with
Right. That's
with
pretty
Willie. Willie flew up and did the show with us.
Yeah, that was his last week.
That was
And it was some of his favorite people.
Yep,
And Billy Joe and Willie.
absolutely.
And you were with them.
Hey,
Yeah. That's great.
I was lucky. I was a fly on the wall on that one, but that was
so
that was a cool gig.
Well, listen, when you were growing up around Waco area, we talked about David Zychek earlier. You used to go listen to him, I'm sure, didn't you?
David was probably one of my first guitar heroes. I mean, because he was the first one I'd ever seen in front of my face
Right.
that could play like that. You know,
He was just amazing.
he was amazing on that guitar. He would sit there and he would be. And this was one of my favorite moments. Was I was with my mom. I think we were out shopping for school clothes or something at the mall. And of course, that Chelsea's was right there at the end of the mall. And so we popped in there and sat down. I think we got a hamburger or something and was sitting there. And David gets up on stage and he's just tearing it up. He's just ripping it up. He's playing Mr. Brownstone from Guns N' Roses and all those songs that were new at the time. And then he goes into a guitar solo, and he's ripping on this guitar solo. And if you ask me, when it's right in front of your face like that, it's way better than anything you ever heard. You know, it's just the way it hits you or whatever. I'd never seen anything like that, and I almost went home and quit that night, but it looked like too much fun. So I was like, "There's no way."
I remember talking to Eddie, and he said that David was one of his big heroes too.
Yep, I believe it.
So you
I
guys,
believe it.
yeah. Well, I wanted to put a plug in for Troy and Anna. They just did a documentary about David called Z: The Story of David Zychek.
That's right. That's right.
And Troy used to play in a band with you.
We used to play in a band called Blind Wolf back in the day. Troy was our bass player for probably about 10 months now. David was a big influence on a lot of people, especially from that era. And to see him remembered like that's awesome. I haven't seen it yet, but I've watched all the interviews. I've seen all the stuff they have online, and I plan on digging in and checking it out at some point.
David's last band, of course, we did a couple of CDs, and I was working full time. We just did this kind of part time, but we created this little Ombre Records. That was David's idea to come up with that, and we brought some bands in because all these people were coming into the studio because they knew David was out there.
Well, Troy came out there.
Troy came out there and recorded.
That's right.
And then Eddie brought a band from Arkansas down, Greg Gardner and Voodoo Cowboy. Man, those guys were good. And I think he might still be out playing. I don't know.
I hope so. Man.
David got sick there at the end, but he was still out playing. And Tony, of course,
Tony came to
ended
play
up
with
playing
us.
bass with you and Billy Joe.
That's right. Tony was a great player. He jumped right in, and the crowd loved him from the day one.
He was an entertainer.
He
that's
sure
for
was, man.
Yeah.
He was an entertaining guy too. You know?
Yeah.
He just had that thing about him that people gravitate towards and they enjoy. You know, and it's a huge loss to lose Tony like that, especially in his hometown where he was from. He was such a big part
Right.
of the musical spirit.
Well, it's kind of funny how all these connections. I guess it's not. It's pretty obvious, I guess, people in the music business, and you gravitate towards different folks.
I saw that in him, and I think he saw it in me. I think that was kind of the original spark between us, was like, we just both got to do this, you know?
Yeah, well, Billy Joe's led an interesting life, that's for sure. Well, this seems like a good point to end this little conversation on. I really appreciate my time with you here,
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure. Good luck with your single.
Clinton, how you doing out there, my friend?
We're doing great.
Okay.
All right, cut.
Now, a long time ago, way back in the beginning, the world was only dreaming. There was darkness all around. Then there was the word, and everything went spinning outward from the silence, and now it's way too loud. And it's a fine line, this line we're all walking, too busy talking to listen to our hearts, and it's about